Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Space for Life. We are in for a tremendous conversation story that I know is going to both challenge those who are listening and at the same time inspire them. I have as my special guest, Steve Ruetschle, who I'm just getting to know. It came out of a conversation with, my good friend and many time podcast friend, David Dwight, senior pastor at Hope Church here in Virginia. And David and I were just having a conversation before dinner together with some friends. And he had just come back from a pastor's conference in Orlando, Florida. And he was telling me about Steve and about his story, which he's going to share with you. And I was honestly just in awe. And we were just kind of talking about the story. And after David shared it with me, I said, do you think there's any way Steve would be willing to come on Space for Life? And he went, well, I don't know, but I'd be happy to ask him. And that's how Steve and I got connected. So Steve is senior pastor at Sunset Presbyterian Church in Beaverton, Oregon. Been there for a while. Prior to that, pastor at Union Church in Manila in the Philippines. And all of these stories kind of converge together. But you're in for a treat to hear Steve's story. And I am too. I have read his wife's book, which we'll talk about, that tells a lot of this story. So, Steve, thanks so much. Really looking forward to hearing your story. And then I think there are just some really difficult, challenging questions, I think, that come from real life that you're going to share with us. So thanks for being aboard. I'm going to let you just take off with,
Okay.
Go wherever you want with this.
All right. Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be with you. And maybe just I'll start just with the pastors conference, and I'll just kind of share what I shared there with the other pastors, really about how I became quadriplegic and walking through that. So you were talking about the Philippines, and it kind of begins in the Philippines. I was a senior pastor at Union Church of Manila in the Philippines, and my younger brother really missed me because he lived in Dayton, Ohio, and wanted to spend more time. So he planned this bonding trip for he and I to go on a motorcycle ride, and this was in North Carolina, and unfortunately, that ride just turned tragic. I had a catastrophic motorcycle accident and fell perfectly wrong and broke my neck and suffered a nearly complete spinal cord injury. And for those who may not know, there's either like an incomplete spinal cord injury or complete. Complete means there's just no way you'll ever walk again, or really have any movement below whatever level that you got the injury from. And then there's incomplete means there might be a possibility of movement. And they first diagnosed me as a complete spinal cord injury. So C6, C7 vertebrae. It was a very, very bad accident. And it left me paralyzed from my shoulders down. I was told I'd have maybe a 10% chance of any meaningful movement below my shoulders. So that's super, super important to have any kind of movement, because if you can't, even adjust how you sit, you can get pressure sores and die from those kinds of things. And then I was, I'd ask, and they gave me about, 1% chance of walking again. But basically what I kept hearing, over and over again is, you'll never walk again. I mean, that was the phrase. And it was hard to describe that. And really, I've been thinking a lot about paralysis ever since then. And I've learned that it's not that you're either paralyzed or not paralyzed, that there are actually degrees of paralysis. So I have had a miraculous recovery, and I am able to walk, but I did not get a complete recovery. So I still live with, relentless pain, strain, and fatigue. So the pain part, people always ask me, like, what's the pain? I have like neuropathic pain from my shoulders down. And it's like getting a third degree sunburn, course that through your body, plug that into an electric socket, and just course it through your body. Just constant nerve pain all the time. And then, strain, it's just there's limitations on, how, like, I can walk around the block, but I can't, do a lot more than, I mean, I can with a lot of pain. People ask about that too, and it's probably like, about an 8 or a 9 pain level when I walk, as opposed to kind of just ongoingly, it's like 5 or 6 out of 10. And then just fatigue from just, constantly thinking about, like, how do I, I have to think through my steps, and just be aware of the pain and all those kinds of things.
So what
So
year was this?
there's
What
this
what
was in
year was
2010.
2010?
2010. So it's been 15 years of living there. So I've learned that, it's not like you're totally paralyzed or not. There's just degrees of paralysis. And I've been thinking a lot about paralysis, because paralysis just means you can't move, that you're stuck. And I've realized that really, you don't have to have a, catastrophic motorcycle accident to be stuck. And a lot of people are paralyzed. They're stuck in all kinds of ways. They could be relationally stuck or unable to move, and whether it's a health concern or finances or, whatever it is, people are stuck. And I have found a huge amount of comfort from the story of Jesus healing a paralytic, because I feel like that has been my story. And so, do you mind if I just
Oh,
share that
please,
story?
please do. I mean, that's,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
it's really become personal to me. Like, there's certain passages that I feel like, we live, and this one I feel I have lived. So the story is pretty simple. There's a paralyzed man, and he can't walk. I mean, he can't move. And Jesus was teaching, and he was such an amazing teacher that people came from all over just to hear him. So there were crowds all around the house where he's teaching. So you just couldn't get in. And again, there's this paralyzed man, and he's not able to move. So he has friends who come and pick up his mat. So there's probably more of them, but you got 4 friends who pick up the mat. They bring him to Jesus, but the crowd is so thick that they just can't get him there. And if you actually think about the story, really what should have happened is they should have brought him back. Like, that is what reasonable people would do. They would say, we tried. The place is packed. We just cannot get you in there. Let's try some other time. But what's amazing about the story is these friends, like, literally stopped at nothing to bring their friend to Jesus. And so they did really, we've read the story, but it is just an unthinkable thing. They go to the top of the house, and then they dig a hole through the roof. And even though you could, even though you technically can dig a hole through a roof in the first century, because it's made of like wood and mud, and like you can technically do it, it's still like vandalism. Like, you should not do this.
Truly.
But they did it. Like, they went up and they dig this hole, and they lower this paralyzed man to the feet of Jesus. And the big giant surprise of that story is that I would have thought, every time I've read it, I thought Jesus like looked at the paralyzed man and said, be healed. But that's actually not what happened. The story says that Jesus looked at their faith. And who was the there? The there was the friends of the paralytic who bring the paralyzed man to Jesus. And Jesus said it's because of their faith that he then, miraculously heals this paralytic, and he picks up his mat and he walks. And I really like that has been my story. And just to kind of illustrate that, so I remember when I was in the hospital, unable to move, and no one had told me that I was a quadriplegic, but I clearly couldn't move, and I tried, I mean, 1,000 times. And I do remember like when they said, you're a quadriplegic, and I was just completely baffled that they would like, I was, but I couldn't believe it, even though I couldn't move. And so I just started, trying like willpower, like, okay, I've moved all my life. I'm just going to will myself to move. So I tried thousands of times, day and night, to move any bit of my body. I mean, anything from my shoulders down. And I couldn't. And, I kept asking, what's my chances? And they basically, you're never gonna, they were kind of applying tough love, you're never gonna move again. And so after a while, if you are told you can't do something and you try again and again and again, you just stop. You stop trying. And that was me. Like I stopped trying because it was too painful to try and just be disappointed each and every time. So I literally stopped trying. And I'll say, if it wasn't for my faithful friends who believe in Jesus carrying me to Jesus, I think I'd still be in a power chair today. And so my wife was really the first person who, I don't know if you can imagine, we had 3 kids. She had to take care of the kids during the day. She drove to the inpatient hospital at around 11 p.m., slept in a chair, got up at 6 a.m., went, took care of the kids, came back, did that every night or every day. Because I was 3 months inpatient rehab and then another 3 months outpatient. But
Good
during the
gracious.
inpatient time, she came to the hospital room after I'd stopped trying, and she said, just try to move your toe. And because it was her, I tried, and this miraculous thing happened. My
Mm.
toe moved, and like I don't know if I can try to give an example, but like I don't know. Did you see that movement?
Barely.
That was it. Like that
Yeah.
was as much movement as I made.
I mean, almost
Almost nothing.
not
Almost
visible to the naked
indiscernible.
eye. Yeah.
But I know that it moved. And this was a huge moment because everything changed at that point. Like if I could move that, then something from my brain was getting through the spinal cord down there. And she really started, the process of my miraculous healing, really, because I wouldn't have done it. And it was her faith, because when she learned that I was injured, she prayed. Like if it had been her and I was praying, I would have just been praying, healer, healer, healer. Like I wouldn't have even asked God what he thought. But she literally asked, Lord, how do you want me to pray? Like, do you want me to let him go? Because it was very touch or go whether I would survive the first couple weeks. Or do you want me to pray that he is able to cope with living in a power chair for the rest of his life? Do you want me to pray that way? Or do you want me to pray for healing? And like really listening for the voice of God, she sensed that God wanted to heal me, which was really outlandish, to
Yeah.
think that in light of what was being said. And so that's part of why she, asked me to move my toe. And that was a turning point for me. And then I had other faithful friends. I had just Christian friends who would come to the hospital room. I had a worship team come and play worship music, or sing worship music. And they just cheered me on for any little movement. At one point, I was able to kind of like move my foot a little bit like that. And they would just encourage me. And my wife wrote a blog to just keep our family informed on what was happening and how to pray. So a friend of ours put this website up, steveruetschle.com. She would just write updates, and the intent again was only family, close friends. But to our surprise, that people from all over the world, over 100 different countries, started visiting it, and we've had over 400,000 people visit that site. And people started praying literally all over the world. And I would get these messages, I see you walking again. I see you dancing with Jesus. Like these little kids would write in. And that was like people carrying the mat of the paralytic to Jesus. Like to hear people believe that I could walk, even though I didn't believe that I could walk, was a huge turning point for me. And I mean, I have so many stories. I could keep going on.
Yeah, well, I am just floored that that whole story, which happened in the Gospels, just like you said it, so is so different from the way that we think about the way God acts. I mean, first of all, we think, well, when God heals, heals 100%. That's the only way he heals. There's never, uh, a continuing part of a story. Then we think, well, when God heals, it's all him and has nothing to do with us. And yet that also isn't really in the Bible, but we've got that idea. And then take it one step further to think that, well, it's other people's faith, not our own necessarily, that God uses to change something in us. That kind of blows away the concepts, but it makes so much sense, really. And that just simple thought right there, I think reframes, so much of what we experience of adversity, of hard things in life. And we spoke a little bit before the podcast, and I shared our story, which people who listen to this podcast are familiar with, of our daughter's journey with cancer for 6.5 years. She also wrote a blog and had thousands of people following and praying for her. And though she died from the cancer, she had an extended, beautiful life, even in the midst of the pain, that went so far beyond any thoughts that the doctors had in terms of her chances. And yet somehow we don't want to necessarily consider, well, God was in that was how God worked in it, because we have such an all or nothing thinking. I don't know.
Yeah.
I imagine you've heard that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many thoughts that I have around that. I mean, first, just in terms of like, just even hearing about your daughter, the community that came around, like one story that just was so profound in my journey, was after inpatient, I went to outpatient. I was working with the head of the rehab department at Harborview Medical Center, which is considered one of the best medical centers, or rehab medical centers in the nation. So we're talking one of the best of the best. And I remember going in to him, and he helped me walk. And I asked him, I said, what helps people? Like, what is the number one thing that helps people recover? And without even taking a breath, he said, community, especially a faith-based community. Community, especially a faith-based community. Because really that is the story of Jesus and the paralytic.
Yeah.
That if the paralytic didn't have friends, he'd still be paralyzed. he'd still be laying wherever he was. It was the friends that brought him there, that had faith in Jesus, that could bring him there. And I think that is so important to any area of healing. It doesn't need to be physical, it could be emotional, any way. We need a community around us, a community of believers that believes more is possible. And that really makes all the difference. I was so shocked. I thought he was going to say, I didn't know what he was going to say, but that it would be a faith-based community as the key to why some people recover and others don't. But it is, healing is a giant mystery. I just preached on it yesterday.
Oh,
That Jesus he came healing, but I was just talking about how healing happens today. And there are different ways that healing happens. Like, one is supernatural healing that I can't deny it. I have too many stories of ways in which people are supernaturally healed, but it is rare. And then God also heals what I would call like integratively, like he uses medical doctors. And if I would definitely be dead if it wasn't for the gifts that I believe God has given to people in the medical community, first responders, medical doctors and nurses, and then even your own effort in the
right.
healing, because you have to participate, and not give up. And a lot of people are paralyzed. They're stuck in participating with God and with the medical community to get better. And, most people get healed that way. And then, of course, there's inner healing that takes place with a multitude of issues. I've seen so much healing happen that way. And then I was talking about redemptive healing, because not everybody gets healed the way we want, or gets healed at all. And there's so many stories. I was thinking of Johnny Erickson Tata, who was in a diving accident at age 17, and she was paralyzed and prayed, that she would be miraculously healed, and she never was. And yet, God has used her life in such an incredible way. She started Johnny and Friends. I listened to every book she had while I was in bed, thinking I was going to live in a power chair the rest of my life. And she has inspired countless people, all over the world. And she has experienced like redemptive healing. Or even the Apostle Paul, who had the thorn in his side, and it says he prayed 3 times, which is a symbolic way of saying he continuously prayed throughout all his life to be healed. And he was never healed from that. Yet he was, the one who writes these soaring passages about this momentary affliction in light of the eternal weight of glory, and was content in all his sufferings. I mean, that is an amazing healing event. And then, of course, there's ultimate healing, which is the promise of Jesus, that if we believe in him, that he promises eternal life with a new imperishable body in heaven. So, like I always say, anyone who believes in Jesus, they have that healing is their certain future, is their
Yes.
certain future. And
Yeah.
so there's all these different shades and ways that we experience or can experience healing, even if an answer is no.
Yeah.
And yeah, I
There's a
don't know if I'm even responding to your
no,
thoughts and questions.
no, absolutely. It's just, it's so dead on. There's a great scene in The Chosen where one of the disciples, little
Mhm.
James,
No, James, yeah.
is portrayed creatively as having an affliction uh, that created tremendous ongoing pain. And there's an interaction with little James, who is being sent out 2 by 2 to preach the gospel and to heal people. And little
Ironically.
James, ironically, and little James says, "How can I do this when you haven't healed me?" And Jesus gives him a really just a tender response. But the end of the response is something along the lines of, but make no mistake, little James, you will be healed. And it's that ultimate healing that Jesus
Right.
was, assuring little
Absolutely.
James of. And I think that in one sense, even though the answers are so much more complicated, in some sense, hearing what you're saying, God gets bigger in my eyes. He's bigger than just a simple yes or no. So I,
Yeah,
I really
that's right.
appreciate it. It's
And
the life. It's the life we all deal with. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. We all do. And like, I mean, I live with, again, I live with relentless pain, strain, and fatigue. I mean, it's tough. It's a very challenging body. I could tell you so many stories about issues related to bowel and bladder and like just tough things. But there is like there are moments of redemptive healing that I experience in it, even though I haven't gotten the answer that I wanted, which is like complete healing. I'd like my body back. I'd like to be able to walk on the beach with my wife or play sports with my boys. I mean, that's just not in the cards. But there are these moments, even the way we were connected is I told my story to a bunch of pastors. And I mean, it was amazing. I told this story just sort of extemporaneously, and they were like weeping. They were weeping, and they said, you have any idea what an inspiration you are? And like that was a redemptive, like that was super redemptive. Or when I preach, every time I walk up on the stage, people who know my story, that is a miracle, just the fact that I can literally walk up. And they tell me how meaningful it is. And I have had a lot of people come to me for healing prayer. And all of those things make the pain and suffering, it's redemptive. Like it has given me an ability to talk to people that I would have never had before. And even just the aging process, because like, let's face it, if you get healed, you're still going to suffer later. You're going to, and then eventually we're all going to die. I mean, that is just part of the human fallen condition.
Yeah.
And so I can relate. In fact, my doctor said back when I was 40, like my doctor said, you have the body of an 85-year-old. And I was watching this one guy like with this
Mm.
cane walk out, hobble out of a grocery store, and I said, I said, my wife was with me, and we were watching him. I said, and he looked about 85, and I said, "Do I look like that?" Thinking that she's going to say no. She says, "Oh no, you look much worse than that." Like, and so I can relate.
Thank you.
I can relate to the reality of aging and all that it means, the losses that happen. And those are and to be able to meet people in that sense, proven.
Yeah, it gives you a voice that, as great as your voice is, just has a weight because of the reality of what people know you have gone through that perhaps never could have had. And I certainly can relate. I've lived a very uh, blessed life in so many ways, ease in so many ways. And yet I know that the reality of what we've gone through as a family, um, it causes or enables people to hear my words differently. And not that I would have ever wanted that, but I'm thankful that in some senses, uh, what we've gone through can have this piece of redemption in it, that God does and is continuing to do good through something that was awful, as in your situation.
I mean, it's the story of Jesus, right? It's a
Yeah,
story of how suffering is redeemed. I mean, that's why actually this is, it reminds me of. Do you have time for me to tell a little story?
sure.
of pain. So I was in what I would call transportive pain when I first got injured. I mean, it was just debilitating, 10 out of 10. Um, and that is true with anyone with a major spinal cord injury. And so on the rehab floor, they had a pain specialist, a doctor. And the doctor came and talked to me about how to manage pain. And one day I'll never forget, she took me through a meditation process for dealing with pain. And so, the whole process, okay, imagine yourself on a beautiful, warm beach. The sun is glowing. It's a blue sky. And so I really tried to like imagine myself there, feel what it felt like to put my feet in the sand. And all kept thinking about was, yes, I'm on this beach in pain. I just felt like pain. Like it did not help at all. And they tried all kinds of techniques. Of course, they immediately put you on, pain meds and all kinds of things. And, uh, and so it just didn't work. But a friend of mine had taped onto the ceiling a picture of an icon of Jesus. And if you think about it, like I was in a neck brace, so I couldn't move my head left or right. None of my body could move, so I couldn't move, and I couldn't move at all. So the only thing I could look at, it wasn't even the walls; it was just the ceiling. That's the only thing I could see. And my friend did a picture of Jesus and just taped it up there so I could look to Jesus. And I remember having this epiphany about pain. I had this image, like it felt very real, of seeing Jesus on the cross. And he was like bloodied and suffering on the cross. And I had this kind of argument, and I'm going to be vulnerable here. I don't like what I said, but this is just what I did. And I was in pain, a lot of pain. And I was talking to Jesus in this kind of epiphany moment. And I said, you don't know what it's like. I said to Jesus, you only suffered for what, 6 hours on the cross? I have been suffering for months, and I have no end to this. And what happened was, I had this sort of image of Jesus looking at me, and he, with incredible love and incredible compassion, and he said something like, yeah, but I'm carrying all your pain too. All your pain. And not only your pain, I'm carrying everyone's pain from the past and everyone's pain into the future. I am carrying all of it. And of course that was true, but in the moment, that's not how my conversation went with him. And it changed me, because that was what helped me deal with pain. It was Jesus. It wasn't meditation. It wasn't my painkillers. It wasn't, thinking peaceful thoughts or gratitude. It was knowing the person who has not only experienced pain, but my pain, and on top of that, everyone's pain. And knowing that he was carrying and knew exactly what I was experiencing gave me relief. It didn't take the pain away, but it redeemed the pain, and it helped me cope with it, to the point where I would say that I would say there's been some kind of miraculous way of walking with the pain that I've experienced the last 15 years.
That's incredibly powerful. And I think about, one of the themes that's coming out in everything we're talking about is this theme of fellowship. And I'm teaching now from Philippians, and the core verse almost in that whole thing is when Paul says, I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death. And what I'm hearing you say is the realization of the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, in a sense, transformed, redeemed, even what you're going through as we talk on this podcast.
That's right. And that is true. And there's no other God who suffers. I think that's the distinction.
Yeah.
It's the, I mean, and he does, but not just suffers independently. He suffers with. And I think there's something when you see the loving gaze of God, a God who loves you, that there's nothing you could ever do to escape his love. And to be in that kind of presence who carries your suffering with you, just like if any human being does that, it is healing. It is healing, and it keeps you going, and it redeems it.
Yeah. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening, and I certainly think about it myself, but how does what you've gone through and dealt with for 15 years, how does that not turn to bitterness in terms of it? Because I think that most people would just say, I would be so angry. I would be so angry that an accident through no fault of my own, just a pure accident, would turn my life upside down.
Yeah, I mean, that is a big, deep theological, conversation there. But I believe, I mean, accidents happen, and I believe that I have a God who loves me, suffers with me, and is with me in it. And I don't really know the answer, and maybe that is a miraculous healing. Maybe my supernatural healing was around guarding of bitterness. Like I don't feel like I've done anything to warrant that. But I do practice regularly gratitude. I have a gratitude log. I write in it every single day. I always put something about my wife every day, and there's something I'm always looking for things to thank God. And there's always things. There's always things to put on it. But it is true that pain can cause bitterness. Unanswered prayer can cause bitterness. And I would just say that there is the possibility of redemptive healing. Yes, you may not get the answer you want in the time you want, but there is the possibility of redemptive healing in those places. I don't have a special answer other than healing is it. People can get injured and suffer in that way, and then the temptation, which is just a temptation toward bitterness, can even create further harm. And but I believe with all my heart there is healing for any kind of suffering.
Well, and I think it, in my mind, it goes back to your wife and her extraordinary prayers, which are completely counterintuitive, even for people of faith, to just say, I'm going to put on blinders and I'm going to pray for nothing but a complete healing. And, the extraordinary relationship with God that must have already been so present for her to seek God out and to hear as best as she could, and then to pray accordingly with incredible fervor for that. It is like the friends of the paralytic digging out that, for her to sit at the foot of the bed and say, move your toe, to subject herself and you to what the doctors would have said is inevitable disappointment. It's extraordinary, and maybe it's those prayers of our friends that keep us from the bitterness.
Absolutely. 100%. She has definitely carried this paralytic to Jesus, and she's really the hero of this story. Yeah, her faith has brought so much healing in my life. Amazing.
Well, the book she wrote, telling your story, entitled 40, the age when the accident happened, is an incredible testament to what God has done. Your places, both of you, in participating in what God was doing, and really the this incredible place that your friends and people in unknown places have played. And one of the things I love, I mean, your story is so amazing, but it's such an encouragement for us to continue praying for our friends, our families, for anybody we feel drawn to pray for, and to pray whether we see, whether we know, whatever, that God may in some way that we cannot understand use our small, meager offerings of prayer to work miracles.
Yeah. Well, I think people think that they are small and meager is the problem but
Yeah.
actually prayer is just, a lifeline of relationship with God, and it is powerful. And I was actually talking to my mom who's 85, and we were talking about the decline of aging and what that looks like. And she goes, I can't do these kinds of things anymore, but I can pray. And that's why I'm always, for people, I'm like, cultivate this conversational, loving, dialogue where you're talking and listening, and cultivate that before your body goes, because it doesn't automatically, building a relationship takes a lifetime, and you don't turn it on in an instant. And I've watched a lot of people age, and then when you age, you inevitably will lose. There's loss, there's limitations. You can't do what you wanted to do before. And yet, if you have this robust, conversational, loving relationship, I mean, Jesus says you can move mountains. I mean, that's a staggering statement, but it's so true. You get to pray for people and watch the power of the Holy Spirit change lives. I mean, and you can do it from your chair. Like, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm just going off by what
No,
about
no,
what you said.
it's
Yeah.
just so good. It's words we need to hear to build the faith before the storm comes.
Yeah.
And to build that relationship, and whether the storms come or what they look like, it is the good life that God has for us, and that life can be really good even when you're dealing with the kind of pain that you're dealing with. So I'm just really moved by your wife's faith, by your participation, and your choice to continue loving God and serving God. So thank you for sharing your story. Really appreciate it. I'm very aware that so many people who listen to Space for Life, maybe perhaps because of some of our story, are people who are dealing with some very difficult things, cancers, struggles of all sorts. Some that would compare with what you've gone through, some that could even be worse. I'd love for maybe just in closing, is there a word that you would offer for those that are just in the midst of that really hard place in life?
Ooh, I think, as a pastor, of a larger church, I mean, I can think of half a dozen faces or more right now who are, in the midst of dying, who are, have cancer, or multiple other issues. So I feel like I carry, I feel like I carry them on my heart and in my prayers. I mean, I think, what I think I continually uh, impart to them or proclaim to them is who they are, that they are God's beloved. That is who they are. God loves them, and there's nothing that will separate God's love for them. And just a prayer that they would be rooted in the love of Jesus Christ, how high and long and deep and wide the love of Jesus is for them, that they would receive the loving gaze upon them. I read the Psalms every day, and I think yesterday's Psalm 32 it talked about those who trust God are surrounded by His love. That it's not that they have love in their minds, like it's on a concept, or in their heart, like it's not an emotion. Like literally, they are literally surrounded by the faithful love of God. And so I think I would proclaim that truth to because if you look at my story, I think it was the faces of the people around me, and most importantly the face of Jesus, the face of God, that I needed to get me to, not only to find healing, but to get me through the challenges. And so I would hope that whatever anyone is going through, that they would receive how profoundly loved they are. And somehow, I mean, my prayer is that they would experience the surrounding love and unending and irresistible and beautiful love of God for them. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, that seeking God first, experiencing His love, I think will carry you through whatever hardship you face, even death, because there's hope on the other side. There is hope on the other side.
Thank you so much. This has been one of those podcasts that I get to do that is just an unusual privilege and honor and a sacred place to enter into the conversation. And I'm so thankful that you took the time and for me to get to meet you through this, avenue. And I hope one day to maybe meet you face to face. But thank you so much for taking the time.
I'd love it. It's been my joy. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
There, obviously, I don't even have to say this one is worth sharing. This is an episode that I think can bless and help so many people. And as we've said, don't stop praying. Don't stop praying. The prayers, the faith that we can offer to those going through hard times can bring their healing. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Steve. God bless you. See you next week.